Good afternoon and welcome to today's HubLive. I think we're pretty on time today, 1 minute late. That's not too bad for a Thursday. My name is Elise Hatton. I'm Rockhampton Regional Council Smart Hub Business Manager, and we are on our very, very last HubLive for 2020. Now, I did tell a lie last week. I think I said we have 2 or 3 more to go, but that was being extremely optimistic and untrue. We're actually on to our last HubLive, and I am very excited because I've literally saved the best for last. I am here with the absolutely incredible Sharon Hunneybell, and she is kind of my counterpart on the Gold Coast. She's the co-founder and also the person running the GC Hub. So, hey Sharon, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really well. Tell us, what's the weather like on the Gold Coast today?
Beautiful as always. So I think it's been a bit humid lately and a little bit of rain, but today I think it's about 25 degrees, not too hot. I was actually just sitting out, we've got a lake across the road from the hub, so I was actually just sitting out there eating a bit of lunch before I came on the call. So beautiful.
Oh, nice. It's a hard life, hey, on the Gold Coast. No, it sounds idyllic. How wonderful. How wonderful. Now, Sharon, you are a very, very experienced entrepreneur in your own right. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background, about where your career started and how you got to being a co-founder of the GC Hub?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and do like an abbreviated version. So I guess I started my first business when I was 23. It was a digital imaging business, and it kind of ended up rolling out of the fact that I was working for a company that decided they wanted to outsource effectively what was my job. So I was doing digital image processing for real estate industry, creating virtual tours. So it was one of the sort of earlier I guess internet startups. That was back in 2002, I think. And anyway, so yeah, so they decided they wanted to outsource these services, and I came back to them and basically said, why don't you outsource them to me? And then they said yes, and all of a sudden I had to register a business, and that's kind of how I got started in the entrepreneurial world. So I definitely fell into entrepreneurship. Never thought when I was at school that it was a career option. Had always thought that it was that I should be following the traditional path of going to university and getting a job. But yeah, somehow I ended up starting something myself, and then it kind of continued from there. So I took those. I ran that business for 4 years. Then I eventually ended up moving on from that. Went into the corporate world, working in IT, and brought those entrepreneurship skills, I guess, with me. I've always thought that what's one of the best things that ever happened to me when going into the corporate world, because so many people, as they're preparing for a job, prepare for one job in particular. But when you go into a corporate role and you've already had the experience of running a business as a whole, you can't help but see your role as part of a cog in a bigger picture, and to sort of be able to have that sort of, I guess, out of the box thinking about what your role is and what you're contributing to a business. So anyway, so worked in corporate for a while, then moved to the Gold Coast in 2009, and was really surprised when I got up here, and there just weren't the same sorts of IT jobs up here as there were in Melbourne, and I guess I'd done a bit of work in Sydney. So I ended up taking a contract for a company in Sydney, and I worked from home for the first 4.5 years that I was on the Gold Coast. Just worked remotely and did work for this company. And after about 2 years, I realized that I'd moved to this beautiful place, this lifestyle city. I was basically in paradise, but I hadn't made any friends or connections because I was just at home. And when I was out and about, I was out and about interstate. So that was when I started sort of networking, trying to again sort of find the IT scene, the startup scene, and essentially ended up joining with a few other people that were kind of looking for an IT scene as well. And we actually started running events and activities, so startup weekends, and through a group called Silicon Lakes. And that's kind of how I got started in the startup space. Things sort of continued on from there. We ended up launching, myself and one of my colleagues who'd been working in that not-for-profit organisation as well. We ended up launching Startup Apprentice, which was high school entrepreneurship programs. That ran that for a little while. Then I ended up going back into the startup world. I joined a company called Opmantec. I had an opportunity to join them at a very early stage when they were just about to hit sort of international growth, and work with them to be able to grow and scale that company into multiple countries. And then sort of a few years into that, there was an opportunity to be able to launch an innovation space under the Advanced Queensland's ARIP program. And so, yeah, that was when we went, you know what, let's take these skills, this journey that we've been on, scaling a business from the Gold Coast, and let's take other Gold Coast businesses on that same journey. You know, let them avoid the pitfalls, learn from our successes and mistakes, and, you know, hopefully create a whole, I guess, cohort of new businesses that are digital, that are building stuff here, creating knowledge-based jobs and selling them overseas, and sort of distributing internationally. And so that's the whole vision, I guess, behind the hub is to we have a sort of a saying, which is the sharing of knowledge makes knowledge greater. So to get all of the entrepreneurs, all the people that have had some degree of success, giving back a little to try and help the next generation have a slightly easier path, and to have, you know, that faster journey to growth.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, these Hub Lives are for what you just mentioned. They're for sharing successes and mistakes so that we can share knowledge and make knowledge greater, which is a saying that I absolutely love. Perfect. So tell us a little bit about the mistakes and the successes that you've had over the years, what lessons you learned, what to do and what not to do for 2020 and beyond.
For 2020 and beyond, well, I mean, this has just been the most incredible year, and you know, it's been so hard for so many people. So many people are experiencing sort of isolation. I myself have had a really unusual year. I actually have adult children that moved out of home for the first time this year, so I became an empty nester, but they're in Melbourne, so I haven't been able to see them all year. So it's been really strange not having them around. But it's certainly been a year that has made a lot of people rethink their lives, their priorities, how they should be spending their time, you know, what really matters to them. And I think a lot of people as well have really started to question, the lifestyles that they were leading like up until now. And so I think that these are some of the lessons that we go into 2021 with. You know, I think that a lot of people had an opportunity to be able to reset even for a little while. And so, you know, one of the first, I guess, things that I think we need to make sure that we don't do in 2021 is pick up some of the bad habits or reintroduce some of the bad habits that we have, you know, not putting aside enough time for ourselves, not getting enough rest, not spending enough time with our loved ones. So I think that's really important. The other thing that I would say for 2021 not to do is don't limit your scope for your business locally or even just Australia-wide. The one thing that I really noticed this year is that the barriers to entry for selling digital products internationally have literally dropped. You know, like Australia has always been seen as a little bit far away, you know, and so in some economies they think that it's difficult to do business with Australia, but essentially, you know, for the whole of the last year, and even though we're now opened up and can kind of go back to a normal life, so many of the countries overseas are going back into lockdown. And so essentially, you know, people still need digital services, life still needs to go on, but it is now just as easy for an Australian to deliver a service to someone in the USA or India as it is for them to be able to do that business with someone that's in the next suburb or in, you know, the next state. So those barriers have come down. So a really big thing to make sure that when you go into 2021, is yeah, don't think local, think global for your customer base.
Oh, love it, love it, love it. Okay, so you did say that you were involved in a startup that just at that pivotal point where they went from local to global and scaled into into international markets. Tell us about that journey and tell us about the lessons that you've learned and that people in our cohort can use to help scale internationally.
Okay, so in this particular instance, most of my experience is in enterprise or B2B sales. So I'll just put that out there first, because it's a very different model, and the way that you would interact if you're doing to consumer is probably very different from business to business. But from a business to business sense, when I know, as I sort of mentioned, like when we were scaling into the USA, for example, we were competing against other software providers, and they were quite big brands that we were competing against. So things like HP, SolarWinds, which is a really big company, IBM, so names that everyone knows, right? And these guys have huge sales budgets. And so we're trying to scale in and compete with these guys, and they're out there, taking people out on expensive steak dinners and on yachts, and so you don't have that same in-market opportunity to be able to woo people. And as I said, so that sort of drops down now. But I guess our biggest thing when we were scaling internationally, we have a freemium model. So with Opmantec, you can download, we've got 2 free products that you can download and use in your own business. And then you can upgrade to either enterprise versions, or you can add new features to those products. So effectively, our path to entry internationally was that we would monitor, where are people downloading these products, and where are the highest level of activations of the premium versions, right? And then we would look for a really good name. So we did have salespeople, so they would be interacting with them. And when we found a really good anchor client that looked like they were going to adopt our paid products, then we would usually try and put someone in market with them and effectively run a strong pilot. And we would have our in-market person there holding their hands, getting them through the pilot. So once they've done that, the software's up and running, we'd do a case study around that. And that then became that customer then sort of became our reference client. And so from there, we would then add some engineers into that space, just have a small support team, and then we're away in that region. And that's kind of the way we went. So our first most busiest region for Opmantec was Mexico. So you never know where it's going to pop up as well. So it was very interesting. There was very little knowledge, not just in the Gold Coast, but in Queensland and Australia as a whole, as to how do you set up a business to operate in Mexico. And so these are things that we had to learn along the way. But again, now if anyone needed to set up in Mexico, they know that they can talk to us, and we'll share our experiences around that. Then it was in the US. Initially, we set up an office in Charlotte, and then later on we set up our San Francisco office. And we actually have our head office over in San Francisco now, because we're having so much traction in the US market that we really need to have a leadership team over there. So.
Wow, that's incredible. Some really good advice. I like that structure. Now, I want to take you back, and I didn't check with you whether it was okay to tell the story, so I hope it's okay. We saw each other last year in Mackay, and at that time you were talking about your role when you were doing photoshopping in the real estate industry, and how you made the front page of the newspaper. Do you want to just tell us that story? I think that's such an incredible story to kind of paint the picture where we started almost and where we are now.
How the world's changed, because it was funny. My old boss from that first job, I remember about 5 years ago, we connected on LinkedIn, and the first thing he did was he sent me a message, and he just was like, I still remember that day. So basically what happened was, so my job was to create image packages for the real estate industry. So we would send out professional photographers. They would take photos of the space, of the house, and then we also did these virtual tours. But we had these retouching packs, right? So you could, if the photographer had gone out and it was an overcast day, then we would, add a blue sky or whatever. It's completely normal practice now for these things to happen. But essentially what happened was I remember it so well. It was a Saturday morning. And these were sort of before the days of mobile phones and all that sort of stuff. So I remember getting a call from my boss, and he said to me, "Have you seen how it's on the newspaper today?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I think you should go down and get the newspaper and then ring me back." And so, of course, I went down and I picked up the newspaper, and there on the front page was this great big sort of headline that said something like real estate scam or something, and it had a picture of an original house, and then it had a picture of the retouched image that I had done. And what I'd done is accidentally cut out some power lines that were across the sky when I'd replaced the sky, because it had really dark clouds. And so they were basically saying that we were deceiving people because they couldn't see that it was under these dark power lines. It was a 3-page article. I was referred to, or the person that did it was referred to as a Photoshop genius, which always made me laugh. But it literally, like, it rolled on from there. So it did end up going like a current affair and a story in Today Tonight. And I was lucky that I was relatively protected by the company that I was doing this work for. The contracts that I had very clearly had, what I was supposed to do, and it was to put in the blue sky and all that sort of stuff. So we were fine, but it always makes me laugh because I remember being so devastated and questioning my ethics, questioning, like, is this what, like, have I been doing something like really unethical by adding a blue sky? But of course now, you jump onto Instagram and nothing's real, and everyone expects that nothing's going to look like it does in the picture. So it's definitely a different world now, but at the time I was quite devastated.
You must have started a trend back then. Touching photos. Hey, Nanette, thank you so much for joining us. I'm here with the incredible Sharon Hunneybell. If you have any questions for her regarding, 2020 or business or mistakes in business or what to do in 2021, please feel free just to pop those in the comments and we'll get Sharon to answer those questions for you. So Sharon, this is really kind of the premise of our last HubLive as well, is to talk about, things that you have done and experienced, lessons you have learned, and what to take into 2021. So that was, I'm sure at that young age, that was pretty impactful for you. And as you said, devastating, for you to use your own word. But what did you learn from that experience and how did you move forward?
I think I learned to, first of all, certainly when I went into my next roles, and when I actually started taking on jobs for other things, I really did start asking myself, is this, should I be doing this? And so I guess it kind of was a little, it was just like a warning, right? To always be conscious of what you're agreeing to do, and to make sure that things sit well with you. And I think, one of the biggest things that I've learned in my life and in business is that, whenever you make a mistake, you kind of always know that you're doing it at the time. There's always that little uneasiness inside that you try and ignore. You tell yourself you're just nervous, or, whatever it is, it's very easy to talk it away. But most of the time you kind of know well in advance that something doesn't feel right, but you keep going down that track. And I think one of the things that I think will become, so one of the things I also learned, that first business, so I actually moved into doing digital imagery, so printing images on mugs, t-shirts. I actually set up like a shop, right? And we were doing all that sort of stuff, and no one else was doing it. And so you got you're able to make a fairly good markup on all of your products, like a mug, for example, with a photo of someone on it and a special message. You could charge $30 for that. And so I had that going for ages, but I wasn't watching the market. I was too young. I was too caught up in what I was doing every day to see the shift in the world to people or to big businesses buying in bulk and importing from overseas. And so, it felt like overnight, I went from having this great business that was doing really well and people would come from all over to get these personalized gifts and things made, to every single Officeworks and Kmart in the country offering this service and, and making the same products available at the cost it was costing me to make them. And so that business, inadvertently, I ended up shutting it down because it just was not going anywhere. And so, it was sort of like, shut it down now or you'll get into trouble. But I guess looking ahead into 2021, one of the things that I am concerned about, just as a person observing the business world, is that I think that there's a false sense of security at the moment because of these JobKeeper payments. So I think there's a lot of businesses that are probably not sustainable at the moment. They may have been before COVID. They are probably not now, but people have a false sense of security because they have these payments that are coming in. And a lot of people will not be making the changes now that they need to make to be ready for those to drop off when we get to March. And so I guess one of the big things I would say going into 21, a big don't is don't be complacent. Imagine now that you don't have those payments and start planning, changing whatever you need to do to make sure that you're going to be able to take your staff and your business forward when they aren't there anymore.
Mm-hmm. Very, very wise words. I also like what you said, you weren't watching the market. I think that happens so much. Business owners get caught up in the day-to-day and get caught up in the busyness of the work, and there is no time in their schedule for researching, watching the market and seeing how the world is changing. And I think that is such a huge lesson in and of itself. Always carve out some time in your schedule, weekly or fortnightly or at the minimum monthly, where you're trying to understand what the world is doing around you in your industry or in other industries that might be a threat to your business. And always try and do those SWOT analyses and see how you can prepare your business to stay in business and to grow through different things. And then in terms of JobKeeper, you are so right. I like what you said when you said, just imagine that those payments are no longer coming into your bank account. What does that look like? And what do you need to do right now to ensure that you can then keep trading after March when that's going to stop? Wonderful. Do you have any other pearls of wisdom? Tell us more about what you've experienced in your years of experience and what you're seeing moving forward in 2021.
What do I see moving forward in 2021? Goodness. If I look at myself, so obviously I run a workspace like as you guys do. Well, we're more of an incubator space in here, but so a few things that I've noticed just in the last few months as we've been coming back to work is that demand for having permanent space or having offices has just about completely dropped off. Nearly everyone has got themselves quite comfortable with this sort of balanced lifestyle of being able to work at home. And that's not just in the startup space, that is when we're talking to our partners. So, large accounting firms, huge companies have still got, are still doing sort of half of their workforce are at home, half of them are coming in. And I think that's going to continue. So I sort of expect that almost like workspaces are going to become more of a social and a learning space. And then people will be working from home when they're trying to get key tasks done. So it's really a little bit different. I'm also seeing more and more people that willing to ask for help, and a huge shift to digital, and to companies that were previously only face-to-face that have moved to digital for COVID, but are now realizing that because but that it has saved them enormous amounts of overheads. You know, it's a great channel to market, and so they're looking now to, you know, create the right processes, to broaden up their marketing channels, to get their messaging right, to be able to operate, you know, with far more of their business using online channels than really any other. So that's definitely a trend as well. So I think, you know, if I was working in the digital marketing space and things like that, creating some basic introductory type packages for all these businesses that have been experimenting with online and now realize this is a channel moving forward, I think it's there's a good place to play there. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's absolutely cool. And in terms of the space, I even wonder whether the whole commercial property landscape isn't going to change quite dramatically over even the next 3 to 5 years, where people realize that these big office buildings, never mind co-working, I think co-working is going to provide exactly what you just said, that space for a bit of socializing and collaboration, and that space for just breaking the monotony of working from home in some ways. But I wonder whether the buildings full of workers or people going to work, I wonder whether that is something that we will no longer see in the future, and what that will mean for people who own commercial real estate, and what that will mean for how we live and work, and what our CBDs look like, essentially.
Yeah, well, because I think that if we're spending the majority of our time working from home, then those places that we want to commute to be able to either interact with our colleagues or interact with the community, depending on what sort of business you're running, people are going to be looking for ones that are closer to home. You know, that whole, you know, commuting for 2 hours. It's just it's got to be something pretty special to be able to for people to want to actually, you know, because effectively that time that we've been spending, you know, 2 hours in the car in the morning, 2 hours in the car at night, which we've always hated, but with everyone running their meetings on Zoom, it's now become so apparent what a waste of time and resources that actually is. That, you know, I think even employers would rather see their staff spend that 2 hours having productive meetings online from home than sitting in a car. So.
Absolutely. Hey, Jess, thank you so much for joining us. I'm here with Sharon Hunneybell. If you have any questions about what was 2020 or what is 2021 to come, please put those in the comments. Or if you have any comments about the year that has been, or what you're excited about maybe for 2021, please feel free to reach out in the comments as well, and we'll read those out for sure. So Sharon, you mentioned the GC Hub being a bit of an incubator now. Can you give us some of your top tips if there's someone who is interested in starting a business or has an idea, what should they do?
Yeah, okay, so top tips, most definitely reach out to someone who's done it before you. And that can be through an incubator space, but that can be from joining Facebook groups. It doesn't necessarily be, but what you do want to have is a support group around you as you are launching this new initiative, especially if you've never launched a business before. It starts off as very exciting, but everyone that undertakes the journey within the sort of first, I guess, 3 months, usually, especially if you're leaving paid employment, as you start to see that the journey is a lot harder than you thought it was. You're seeing your money deplete, your savings depleting, you lose confidence in yourself, the conversations that you thought you would have, the customers that you thought you would have haven't turned out the way that you thought they would. And so, you know, people do need to have that support network around them, even if it's just for that understanding that this is something that everyone goes through. But then also goals and accountability. So, you know, set yourself goals around, you know, where you want to be at, the conversations with customers, particular revenue targets, work backwards with those as well. So, so just sort of if you know that you want to hit a particular target, work out if I want to be making 10 grand a week by in 6 months time, and my average customer is this price, is paying this much, so how many customers do I need to sign up every week? I've always loved 10 before 10. One of our mentors, Hank Kingman, who was one of the co-founders of Nudie Juice, I think, he introduced me to the 10 before 10 concept, which is basically whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether it's sales calls or whatever it is, you just schedule in to do 10 of them, and you have to do them by 10 a.m. So
that's what a great little productivity tip. That's really cool. 10 before 10.
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so find a community or find someone who has done it before you and do those things that you have to do to achieve your goal and prioritize them and do 10 before 10.
Yeah.
Nice. So do you have any, because this is an interesting one. I think now that we're working independently from home, online a lot, do you have any productivity tips that we can perhaps incorporate into our toolbox? Like, how can we get the most out of our day so that we don't have to spend long hours working, but still be able to achieve the good results that we need to achieve?
Well, I have to admit, I am really, really bad at doing these things, even though I know that they're the right things to do. But essentially, you always need to have a bit of a to-do list. So you need to know the things that you need to get done. And the next thing from that is something called the Eisenhower Matrix. Or a lot of people who've read like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you see it in there as well, which is, I think they call it being in the B quadrant. So the idea is that you then take that list of tasks and you work out, is this urgent and important? Is it urgent and not important? Is it not important and urgent? And is it not urgent, not important? And then effectively from you separate that up, and then from there you work out, okay, these are the things I need to do immediately. These are the really important things that I should be working on. These are things that I can get someone else to do, because even though they're urgent, they're not important. And these things that aren't urgent and are not important, should I even be doing them at all? And that's basically kind of how you should be managing your time. So yeah, that's pretty good. The other thing, there's a group called Peak Persona. They do these things called done days, and we've run a few of them at the Hub, and they are brilliant. So essentially what they do there is you have Pomodoros, they call them. They're like 20-minute blocks of time. So you basically, with your to-do list, you've got your tasks there. So you just pick a task and you do it for 20 minutes. No breaks, have some concentration music going, no phones, no messages. You just do the task, and then at the end of the 20 minutes you stop, you take, have a drink, have something to eat, have a break, then you go back in, and you can basically end up getting, and what would normally be an 8-hour day's worth of work done in perhaps a 4-hour day, because you're doing those concentrated chunks of work and then having those little times to break and refresh in between. So
that's amazing. So how many 20-minute segments could you do in a day, or would you do in a day?
That's a good question. I mean, like, I have to admit, I find it exhausting when I do them. So because I sometimes just do it at home. If my to-do list just looks so freaking ridiculous and they're all things that are urgent and important, then I do it. But I usually try and do about 8. I don't like doing more than 8 of the sprints in a day. I find that after that I get a bit exhausted. Plus, you start, you can hear your phone buzzing and the things going to voicemail and the binging and all that sort of stuff. And so you need to check in with the rest of the world at some point. So I usually try and, 2 o'clock, that's it. Then you're answering emails and responding to other demands of life.
Fabulous. Okay, so my last couple of questions are, and what have you set out for yourself, or goals or ambitions, dreams, wishes for 2021? What is it that you're looking towards and looking forward to?
Yeah, so I've made a bit of a conscious effort to I've got a really good team here at the Hub at the moment. And so I haven't had to spend as much time in here operationally as I have for a while. So we've got a great member growth manager, Sam Cohen. So he checks in with all of the members and sets them up with their sort of 3, 6, 12-month targets and all that sort of stuff. I've got a wonderful event manager, Summer, who does all of that, all the coordination of the events and things for me. So that has allowed me, I guess, especially in the latter part of this year, to really start looking at, you know, what do we want to be focusing on for the Hub for the future? And so we've been working on a lot of international partnerships, and we've also been working on creating a lot of investment readiness type strategies and programs, as well as different support structures we can put in place for people to access funding. So not necessarily investment, it can be venture debt or loans, but making sure that they have the right structure within their business and security within their business to be able to fund their venture in a more appropriate way. So yeah, so really like in the next sort of, you know, next year in 2021, I really want the Hub to become that place where people to go to for international growth, or for business growth through like capital injections, that sort of stuff. So you would be coming in here when you're geared up and ready for growth. And so yeah, love startups, love working with the ideas stage things. I find that really inspirational, and we'll always be doing community things like startup weekends. But I feel like the place where we can double down and help people the most is in that growth. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. And for you personally, Sharon, what does 2021 look like?
I'm hoping more time in the outdoors. Last year, I had this fantastic plan before all this happened. So my original plan for this year was I was going to travel. So I had my daughter when I was 19. So I never had a gap year. And I've basically waited until my children, they're now 22 and 19 themselves, for them to grow up so I could finally go traveling. So this year in December, I booked a 1-year travel insurance policy, and I was going to do six-week trips throughout the year. I wanted to go to Europe, I wanted to go to Vietnam, and I wanted to go to India. And of course, none of that's happened. So next year, I would love to be able to travel. I don't think we'll be able to, but I am going to try and set aside some of those chunks of time to be able to travel within Australia. And of course, spending time with those scale-up companies as well. Will, you know, that I like being able to use my brain and support those strategies. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Sharon, thank you so very much for joining us. We do wish, I'm sure that those travel plans will come true at some point, maybe not in 21, but let's hope at some point those will come true. They do sound like six-week trip sounds amazing, honestly. Look, I do wish you and the GC Hub all the very best for 2021. And also for everyone who's been watching our Hub Lives and following along, I wish you the very best for 2021 as well. And while 2020 has been very interesting and quite challenging, I am the eternal optimist. So I do hope that it brings only good things in business and also in people's personal lives, and also for you, Sharon, that everything will work out amazingly. So thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate you joining our Hub Live today, the last Hub Live for 2020. And hope that we can maybe interview you again in the future. That would be amazing.
So I'd love to come on board again. And thank you for having me.
It's been super fun. Thank you so much for joining us for all our Hub Lives. We'll see you again. I think we don't come back until February in 2021. So we will, and then we have a whole new lineup, and we'll be doing our Hub Lives fortnightly, and things are going to be a bit different and a bit more interesting. So we do look forward to seeing you then. Have a good Christmas and a happy New Year. We'll see you later.